Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Perry, I'll start with you. Ms. Perry, I have the honor and privilege of representing the 1st Congressional District of Georgia, which includes Effingham County, Georgia, Rincon, Georgia. You ever heard of it?
Yes.
You have?
Of Effingham?
Rincon, Georgia, Effingham County, Georgia.
I have.
Yes, I'm sure you have. You're aware of a lawsuit, Jane Doe versus USA Gymnastics?
I am.
You are. And that lawsuit was settled just last month, I believe.
Recently.
Recently, the beginning of April, it was. That is correct. Let me ask you something. Just to give you an idea of what happened here, there was a gentleman, a gymnast, who opened up a gym in 2002 in Effingham County. He opened up a gym, and he, in a newspaper story, it stated that McCabe, and his name was Bill McCabe, by the way, he's in prison for 30 years. Right?
Yes.
But in 2002, he opened up a gym. A newspaper article said McCabe and a new partner girlfriend opened Savannah Metro Gymnastics in Rincon, Georgia. Both are USA Gymnastics professional members and USA Gymnastics safety certified. Bill is also a USA Gymnastics skill evaluator. Bill has been teaching since 1991. Of course, what happened is that the mother of an 8-year-old enrolled her daughter there. And then what happened was that for 3 years, until the middle of 2005, that daughter was in classes there with this sexual predator, is essentially what he was. And then what happened was that she went out to her car one day and she found an envelope on her car, and it had all these details about what previous problems that Bill McCabe had had. She took and she called USA Gymnastics, and this is what she said. I spoke to a woman there, and I told her that I had this packet of complaints against Bill McCabe, and I asked whether she had any complaints against him, and she said no. She said no. Yet, if you look back on his record, you'll find that in October of 1996, he was fired from Gymnastics World in Fort Myers, Florida, because he was bragging to a colleague about his efforts to coerce a 15-year-old cheerleader to have sex with him. And then in July of 1997, he was fired from Five Star Gymnastics in Erlanger, Kentucky, following an incident in which gymnasts he had taken to a camp in Pennsylvania. Parents had also complained that McCabe exposed his genitals to some gymnasts. And then it goes on to tell about all these things before 2002 that this gentleman had done. He had been, and in fact, he had been fired also from another area. And they actually sent a packet to USA Gymnastics detailing all of these situations that he had been involved in, and yet no response whatsoever. Do you ever do background checks on any of your coaches like this?
First of all, let me say that is...
Now, do you ever do background checks on any of your coaches like this?
So
it's a yes or no question.
There are background checks that are being done currently.
Did you do background checks on him? This sexual predator who is in jail, in prison for 30 years, did you do background checks on him?
I was not there. I can't answer that.
Well, find out who was there, because I need an answer to
sir.
it, okay?
Yes, sir.
Now, you know, it gets better if there's such a thing, because after he was sentenced to jail, after he was in prison, a civil lawsuit was filed. And for 5 years, until it was just recently settled out of court last month, for 5 years you argued that you had no responsibility to protect these children training under your organization?
I did not argue that. That's unacceptable. I did not argue that.
Who argued it then?
I started in December of 2017, but let me say this.
Now, you know, let me say this. This is ridiculous.
I agree.
And how you can work for an organization like this that let this happen. You know, I've sat here throughout this whole hearing, and there's one thing I haven't heard from any of you, and that is, I'm sorry. I haven't heard from any one of you say to the parents, to the children, to the grandparents, I'm sorry. And that's despicable.
Let me answer if I can, please.
Answer what?
I've said I'm sorry.
If you don't want to say you're sorry, I don't want to talk to you. And I'm reclaiming my time, ma'am, and I'm going to tell you, this cannot be tolerated.
Right.
Ms. Lyons, it's my understanding that you wrote in an email about a former USA Taekwondo athlete who sent information, who filed an ethics complaint. You wrote an email that this sounds like the same old BS? Did you write that in an email?
I did.
You did? And are you currently the acting director, the acting CEO of the USOC?
I am.
You should resign your position now. That insensitivity tells me that you are not fit to serve in that position.
Oh, my God.
Gentleman's time's expired.
Mr. Chairman,
The
I'd like to
record-
take a moment of personal privilege.
Just, let me say
Fine.
something first. Let the record reflect that during opening statements, the U.S. Olympic Committee and the NGBs represented here all acknowledged responsibility for previous actions. With that, I'll recognize Ms. DeGette for a point of personal privilege.
Not only that, Mr. Chairman, they all apologized to the victims and to their parents. And furthermore, Ms. Perry, who was just relentlessly badgered by Mr. Carter, was brought in December to fix this. Now, I hope she does fix it.
Ma'am,
But
she
to
was on the
badger
board
her
of
is
directors when this
inappropriate, Mr.
happened.
Carter.
She was on the board when
Gentleman,
this happened.
gentleman's no longer recognized, and we're going to proceed with our questioning.
Mr. Chairman,
So at